Hello, and welcome to Steve's Mixtapes. If you were listening last week, you will know that this week's episode follows on very nicely. Of course, last week I was speaking to Ian Daley from Root Publishing, and my guest mixer this week is an author who came up several times in that conversation because he is a writer who's also published by Root Publishing. Amongst them, there's Bringing It All Back Home, a book about searching for a soundtrack to your own life story. Song for My Father, a title that Ian chose, Ian Daley that is, last week, which is a reflection on a lifelong search for a father figure. And It's the Beer Talking, a book about a lifelong love affair with local pubs. And we were just talking about the fact that I often do these shows on a Saturday night, and that's quite good because it gives me an excuse to have a glass of beer while I'm doing it. I can particularly recommend Bringing It All Back Home, a book that I found to be both funny and very deeply moving as well, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So anyway, welcome to Steve's Mixtapes, Ian Clayton.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Steve.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Just to start off, obviously you did crop up quite a bit in my conversation with Ian in last week's show. I seem to have a plethora of Ians at the moment. I've got another two Ians coming up. I had a big run of Gavins early on, and now we seem to be in Ian territory for the rest of the year. I think I'm going to have 6 Ians by the end of the year. Anyway, we talked about the roots of Root, if you'll pardon the pun, and of course it's all started with Yorkshire Art Circus, and you worked with Yorkshire Art Circus as well, is that right?
I did. I wasn't first workers with it, really. It started out with a bloke called Brian Lewis, who sadly passed away only last week, week before last. Brian had this idea that everybody has a story to tell, and it was a matter of trying to find ways to enable them to tell that story. And he started off, the first thing he did, he set up a postcard company with the playwright Trevor Griffiths, and they were political postcards. Maggie, 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 out, out, out was one of them. I seem to remember.
Reminds me of my student days.
Yeah, they are. And but one of the things that they did was something called the Featherstone Massacre. Now, my hometown is Featherstone. It's a old pit village in West Riding. In 1893, there'd been a lockout at the local pit, and there was some bother outside the pit gates, and the military were called, and they opened fire on the gathered people at the pit gate, and they wounded 20 and they killed 2. And it's quite an infamous, as you might imagine, quite an infamous part of our local history. And people had forgotten about it. And then in the 1970s, Brian and another artist called David Prudo did a series of paintings about it and brought it back into public eye, into local history eye. And then they made postcards out of them. And I helped Brian to flog some of these postcards. And that was, in a way, it was the beginning of telling local stories. Local historical stories. It wasn't all history based. A lot of it was, some of it was memoir based, some of it was community books, some of it, and then eventually it came to encompass attitudes and opinions and almost kind of social policy making. So you take a subject like housing or education or environment, and you'd talk to people in local towns about their views on those subjects and their stories on those subjects. And we made big books that featured sometimes 150 voices telling stories. Yeah.
But you haven't just been a writer of your career as well, haven't you? You've done quite a bit in TV and radio.
I have. I've been an accidental man in a lot of ways. I'm the son of a coal mining family. Everybody who comes from Featherstone either worked in coal mines or worked in something that was connected to coal mining. But all my family were coal miners. They worked down the pit on coal face. I was brought up mainly by my grandparents. My granddad was a tailgate ripper. And he was still on the coal face in his 60s. I don't know how he did it, but he did.
God.
But I left. I was a a good scholar at school. I was a brainy lad, I suppose, and I did well, and they had me destined for university. There were people in my family who used to say, "Oh, he'll be first lad to go to Cambridge and Oxford from round here, will he?" And obviously I never did, but and I ended up working on building sites. But I always knew I could write, and I was always writing. And I used to send stories off to Radio 4, to Morning Story, if you remember that. And I got some accepted, and that gave me a bit of confidence. And then when I met Brian Lewis, who founded the Art Circus, that gave me a way into getting my own writing published. And I wrote a play, Steve, about the Featherstone Massacre, strangely enough, on the 100th anniversary in 1993, the 100th anniversary of it. And local television came to do a feature for their news programme, for Calendar News, which was Yorkshire Television's local news programme. And the director liked what I was saying to him, and he said, "Look, we're starting a new flagship programme soon. It's going to be a magazine programme. We're looking out for new presenters, and we want local voices. And we wondered if you'd like to do an audition." And I did an audition for it, and I ended up being on Yorkshire Television as a presenter for a good 15 years after that. Yeah. I thought I was going to do six 5-minute programmes, and I ended up being there 15 years.
It's sort of gone, that world of regional television, in the same way, hasn't it? Because I grew up in Durham, so obviously another coal mining area. And you know, watching Tyne Tees, we got Tyne Tees, we got Look North rather than Calendar. You know, but it was very separate. It wasn't really till I went to university I realised there were certain like I never saw Tiswas. People bang on about Tiswas, don't they, as this great life-changing thing. We never get it because Tyne Tees never showed it. And that seems a bit sort of alien to the world of broadcast media now, doesn't it?
I'll tell you what Tyne Tees did show, Steve, though. I remember it well from my teenage years. There was a programme called Geordie Scene.
Oh, yes.
And it was a fabulous music programme. It was so different to anything that had been on before, I think. And Dr. Feelgood got the start on there.
Oh, okay.
They used to be on Saturday mornings, about 1974 or 5, it to be. And I remember well Wilco Johnson doing his manic guitar playing on that programme. Yeah. Well, but regional television, it's such a shame because it de-skills your local creative people. You know, Yorkshire Television had its own people to do everything, not just camera work and sound work and electric work and lighting and editorial work, but they had a massive maintenance team who could mend anything. I remember once we were filming in France, and we were on a mountain, and wind blew the camera off at mountain, and it went rolling down this mountainside and smashed the camera. And when would this be? About 2000 or something. And we put it on the Eurostar train home to Leeds. And the lads back in Leeds had it mended and back on the next Eurostar train back to us within 2 days. And, you know, what a fabulous resource you've got there that, you've got a local team from Leeds filming in France. They break a camera. They know they've got lads they can trust back home to mend it. They put it on a train, they get it mended, it's back with you, and you carry on filming within 2 days. Yeah. It couldn't happen now, that. No.
It's a bit like regional press. I mean, you know, areas used to have proper regional papers with offices and stuff. Now, most local press outlets are just one bloke and a laptop in a room, aren't they? Copy and pasting things from other news sources.
Copy and pasting things from other, and not going out investigating. No. And more importantly, not knowing their local area. We had a local paper. I used to write for our local paper, Pontefract and Castleford Express, and they got shut of me for cutbacks. And they ended up doing the Pontefract and Castleford Express was written in an office in Halifax, I think, which is 40 mile away. Now, how do their local journalists know a road in Pontefract if they're reporting a fire or something serious that happens on a certain road in Pontefract. They don't know it. They've
Yeah.
no idea what it is.
Mm.
So local knowledge is so important to people, and I don't know. I
Yeah.
could go on all night about that.
Well,
Don't ask me something else.
we should possibly get onto some music. So your
Yeah, yeah.
playlist, how did you find the process of putting it together? Because some people agonize over it for ages, some people find it really easy to do. What was your experience of putting together the 10-song
Yeah,
playlist?
yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I've done these sort of things quite often, and I change my mind all the time. I have a vague idea of what a playlist should be like. You know, the ups and downs, the nuances of a playlist. I suppose you start from a point of view of the things that you truly like, and then you can't go wrong. I've not picked anything that I think is fashionable or cool. I've just picked my favourites.
Yeah.
But then again, my favourites change every day.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm looking at this list now and I'm thinking, well, I don't know why I picked that. So it must have been a Thursday.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. My, I've been a record collector and music obsessive all my life since I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. Uh, I had my own collection of records in a cabinet, and I've obsessively collected and been interested in music for 50 odd years, 60 years nearly, and it's I don't know.
Well,
I've tried to reflect that, I suppose.
you mentioned the first song, your Hit the Ground Running song,
Yeah,
from you first heard it in your last year at junior school.
I
So
did.
that ties in with childhood. It also ties in with what I mentioned last week about your books and about Root Publishing, because the gentleman in who's singing this song is somebody who you've
Is it
written about.
another Ian?
Yeah,
Another
yes,
Ian.
another Ian, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lovely continuum here, Steve. I used to Tony Blackburn's breakfast show, Radio One. I used to obsessively listen to that, and this song in the autumn of 1970. That's my last year at junior school before I went to big school. Um, it was always on the wireless every morning. Tony Blackburn loved it, and he played it to death. But there's something about it. There's a kind of ethereal quality to this tune. It's a Joni Mitchell song for a start, so it can't be a bad that she didn't write any bad songs. And it's got a lovely message. And it is a great kicking off point for anything. You know, I asked him where you're going, and this he told me. Is that what a lovely line to bring
Yeah,
you into something. Little did I know that later in my life I would become close friends with the singer Ian Matthews. In this song, he's in his guise as Matthews Southern Comfort. It's the only number one that they ever had.
yeah, yeah. So let's hear it now. This is Matthew Southern Comfort with their 1970 single Woodstock.
I came upon a child of God. He was walking along the road. When I asked him, where are you going? This he told me. I'm going down to Yasgur's farm. Think I'll join a rock and roll band. I'll camp out on the land. I'll try and set my soul free. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Then can I walk beside you? I have come here to lose the smog, and I feel just like a cog in something turning. Well, maybe it's the time of year
Now, Ian, the second category we have is something new, and I always ask people who come on as guest mixers how they, or even if they try, to keep abreast of what comes out. Because what did I read the other day? Something ridiculous, like 99,000 songs are released new on streaming services every week, or something crazy like that. So it is impossible. Some people just say, I don't really bother. Music comes to me. Some people have particular ways of going looking for it. Do you actively look for things that are new and coming out?
Absolutely. I never tire of that. And I work on all fronts. I read music magazines. I don't subscribe to them anymore because you end up with piles and piles of music magazines. Then you don't know what to do with it. I've got The Wire. I've got Mojo. I've got Songlines, the World Music magazine. I used to have the old enemies. And I had piles and piles of them in my house at one time. I just gathering dust.
Yeah.
I've saved some of my best ones because I still get nostalgic about some of the music magazines.
When
But
I was at university, my mum chucked out. I had piles and piles of NMEs and sounds and
yeah,
all this in boxes, but they
yeah,
were just gathering dust, and she did chuck them out. And there've been times where I thought, it'd be quite nice to go through those and pick out some old
yeah,
artists. But yeah,
yeah. I had the very sad task of helping to sort out one of my dear friends, Volker Bredebusch, a German lad who I know from Wuppertal. He died, and I had the very sad task of clearing his house, helping his brother and family to clear his house. And in his basement, he had magazines like you've never seen, piles and piles and piles of stuff. And it felt such a shame that it was just going to be skipped then, because he'd gathered them over all of his life, and he was a real fountain of knowledge about English folk rock music from I don't know, from Nick Drake and John Martin to
other Ian
Airport
told me
Convention.
because Volker is quite a big character in Bringing It All Back Home, isn't he? He crops up quite a bit
He does.
in
We were very close. I'll talk about Folker. There's some music coming up later. I'll talk about Folker a bit later, but I can talk about him a little bit here because this next tune we're going to play is connected in a way to Folker. Folker was John Martin's European tour manager,
right.
and as such, and I'm a big fan of John Martin myself. And Folker, the very first thing Folker said, I met him in 1982, and he said to me, You live in Featherstone? I said, I do. He said, it's not far from Leeds. I said, I know. He said, do you know John Martin's Live at Leeds album? only a music madman could ask you that question within 3 questions of meeting you. But he once took me up to meet John. I went to he lived in a little cottage on borders in a village called Roberton then. He lived next door
Enough,
to
I know it's a small, obscure place. I actually know Robertson.
Yeah.
They used to live there. Yeah. A friend from university. I had one of my kids was very poorly and was in the LGI in Leeds
Yeah.
for quite a while, and we used to stay with her. So yeah, I've mentioned her to other people before. Nobody knows where that is. I have to say it's near Dewsbury.
No. This is no.
Oh, is this another Robert Town?
This is another Roberton entirely. This
Oh.
is Rob. You're thinking of Robert Town.
Yes, I am. Which has
That's
2
near
T's.
Dewsbury.
So that isn't
Yeah,
a typo on your part. This is an actual different place.
it's a different place.
Ah,
John
right.
Martin lived. I'd have liked John Martin to live in Robert Town. It'd have
Well,
been nice to
I was
visit
a
him.
bit surprised the idea of John Martin living in Robert Town. That's why I wanted to ask you about it.
No, he didn't live at Robert Town. He lived in Roberton.
Ah,
And Roberton is a tiny village up on the Scottish borders. And there was a church there called the Church with One Bell that later became a title for one of his albums. But at the time, he ended up living in that church for a while. But at the time I met him, he lived in a cottage next door to it. So yeah, I went up to meet John with Folker, and I hung about with John on a couple of occasions after that through Folker. But this piece of music that I've chosen is a John Martin song. It's perhaps the most famous John Martin song, Solid Air. And this has been reimagined by a guy called Sean Khan, who has something called the Modern Folk and Jazz Ensemble. This record came out last year, and they've reimagined um, Solid Air as this kind of jazzy, pastoral folk tune, and they made a really, really good. The good cover versions of John Martin songs are hard to come by. There's not that many good ones of them. Claire Martin once did a fantastic version of "Man in the Station." There's not that many good cover versions, but I think this is one.
You've been taking your time and you've been living on solid air. You've been walking the line and you've been living on solid air. I don't know what's going round inside, and I can tell you that it's hard to hide when you're living on solid air. And you've been painting the blues and you've been looking through solid air.
Sean Khan and the Modern Jazz and Folk Ensemble with their cover of John Martin's Solidaire, released in 2024. Okay, now we're moving on to something borrowed. Before that, I have another standard question, Ian, which is to ask you, have you always been somebody for, I suspect the answer to this is yes, but always been somebody for compiling playlists, making mixtapes, etc.?
Yeah, I was one of them who used to make cassette tapes for people
Yeah.
because I was always trying to spread the message, I suppose.
You're an evangelical.
Yeah, no. No, I'll cut that out straight away. I'm not an evangelist for music, but I am I don't know. I do want people to hear good things. When you make a mixtape on them old cassettes, you did it for your own amusement as much as for the
Yeah.
person that you were doing it for, I think.
Yeah.
So I had great fun stopping and starting records to put on tapes, and then listening to the finished product. You get as much pleasure as hopefully the person that you give it to will, and you give it to a person because you like them. So I think that's another good reason for doing it. And I just want to carry on just a tiny bit more about how I find music in the first place. You asked me that, and I talked about music magazines. But I'm one for listening to what friends have to say as well.
Okay.
And I'm always intrigued by what people tell me that they've been listening to. And I'll always follow up. Even if it's naff or even if it's not my sort of thing, I'll always try to follow it up to see what intrigues them. So that's another way I find out.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I've come across more new things this year from doing this program than probably any other year in my life, to be honest. Perhaps other than at university, when obviously a lot of loaning of records and seeing bands went on. But pretty much almost on a weekly basis, hearing 10 songs, often by artists that I either haven't heard or B are ones that I've know of but have never quite got around to investigating properly. Do you know the sort of thing?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So anyway, for your Something Borrowed, you've gone for Norma Waterson, an artist I know, although I didn't know this song, and I was quite surprised to find out it's a Grateful Dead cover.
It is. It's it's not experimental Grateful Dead in the kind of Dark Star Saint Stephen category. It's more circumspect than that. It's from a later. I think the Grateful Dead's great period was early 70s when they did Live Dead and Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, albums like that. So this is from a much later album, I think late 80s maybe. But so it's more circumspect. It's when the Grateful Dead were a safer band. But Norma takes it and makes something else entirely out of it. She turns it into the folk song that it probably is, actually.
Okay.
I think the Grateful Dead were trying to make a folk song when they did this song, Black Muddy River. But I think it took Norma to turn it into what it was.
Right.
Norma was the greatest singer who ever drew breath, in my
Yes,
my
I
opinion.
highlighted that bit in your notes. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, I think she's very special. In my life, she's special. When I worked on telly, I did a television program with her. She'd just come back from a tour of Australia and New Zealand. And she'd only nicely got back the day before, I think. So she was really, really tired. But she'd promised that she'd do this telly program with us. And she sat at her kitchen table. And she was a bit grumpy because she was tired. But whenever you ask Norma to sing, she'll sing for you. Because that's, I mean, she did. And she sang, what did she sing? Green Grows the Laurel, an old English folk song.
Okay.
And the power of her breath was, it nearly knocked me out my chair. It was incredible. The dynamism that was coming from her body. She sang with her body, did Norma. And then sometime later, I've got a musician friend called Richard Hawley, who you'll be aware of. And Richard was making a radio program, about the ocean. People live near the ocean, and Norma lived near the ocean in Robin Hood's Bay. and I went with him to her house, and he had the same experience. She sang for him. She sang Bay of Biscay for him, and he sat at her knee like a little boy learning. And it was just what a vision that was that day, and he couldn't get over it. And then we came out of her house, and we got back in car, and we were talking about what we'd heard and excited. And Richard said, "Shut up a minute, be quiet." And we all went quiet. There were four of us. We all went quiet, and he said, "Can you still hear her?" and we all agreed that we could, because a voice was such a thing that it echoed and resonated inside you long after she'd stopped singing. Pardon?
Imprinted it on itself on your mind.
Imprinted. Yeah, it was an elemental thing. It was like I said, she sang from her body. It was a body thing, a very physical thing.
Okay. I definitely do know Robin Hood's Bay. I'm not mistaking that for any other place, because I used to live near Filey. You'll know Filey.
Oh
well. Just inland from Filey, a place called Hunmanby. So
I know Hunmanby Gap. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I lived there back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right.
I do know where we're talking about.
Anyway, that area, yeah.
So let's hope listeners feel the power of Norma's voice on this. This is her singing Black Muddy River.
When the last rose of summer pricks my finger, and the hot sun chills me to the bone, when I can't hear the song for the singer, and I can't tell my pillow from a stone, I will walk alone by the black muddy river, sing me a song of my own. I will walk alone by the black muddy river, sing me a song of my own. When the last bolt of sunshine hits the mountain, and the stars start to splatter in the sky, when the moon splits the southwest horizon with the scream of an eagle on the fly, I will walk alone by the black muddy river and listen to the ripples as they fall. I will walk alone by the black muddy river, sing me a song of my own. Black muddy river, roll on forever. I don't care how deep or wide, if you've got another side. Roll muddy river, roll muddy river, roll muddy river, roll. And when it seems like the night will last forever, and there's nothing left to do but count the years.
Leaving aside your something new choice, only one of your selections is less than 20 years old. and around half
Really?
of them are, yeah. I looked at them, and about half of them are 40 years or more old. So is that indicative of what you listen to, or is that just a bit skewed because of the ones that you've chosen for this playlist?
It might be due to the fact that I'm 66 years old
Well,
myself. I don't know. I'm a bit of a nostalgist, and as I get older, I get more and more. I've been nostalgic since I was about 7, but I think as I get older, I'm even more nostalgic. So I do like older things. I hadn't realised actually that I hadn't picked some newer tunes. I could have done, I suppose.
wow. It doesn't matter
Uh,
when they're from. It matters whether they're any good or not.
yeah,
Uh,
I suppose it
the
does. I
most important
suppose it
thing.
does.
So you're
Yeah.
something old. You've gone for something from 1958, and we've got another geographical connection here because you mentioned your obsession with this artist began in a second-hand record shop in York, and I know York
Mm.
as well because I went to university in York. So do you remember which second-hand record shop it was?
I think it was Riverside.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
When did you go to university there?
87 to 90, and then I stayed in York until 92.
I think it was still open
I
in
think it was. It rings a
'87.
bell. Yeah.
It was near what they call that bridge, not Lendl Bridge, the one that comes where Micklegate comes into the city. That bridge
Oh,
there.
no, just called Micklegate Bridge.
It might be called Micklegate Bridge. It was on the side of there.
Right.
It
Okay.
was
Yeah. No, I
on the
think I
side
know
of
what
Micklegate.
Yeah. Okay.
There were two brilliant second-hand record shops in York. One was that Riverside, and the other one was Cassidy's down
Yeah.
Gilligate,
Yeah. I remember Cassidy.
which was another record shop where I nearly bought Vashti Bunyan's album and didn't because it was 40 quid. It was on the wall in a plastic sleeve for 40 quid, and I thought, should I buy that? And I couldn't foil it, as we used to say, an old-fashioned expression. I couldn't foil it. I think I had enough money, but I didn't want to spend that kind of money. And I wish I had it done because it's probably worth about bloody
Mm.
4,000 quid or
Yeah.
something now. Something daft. All right, well, an original copy of Ashley Bunyan's first album. But
So
this was in Riverside,
yeah.
and I think an old man. This is the story that the bloke behind the counter told me. There was an old man who'd taken his life's collection of jazz LPs in only a short while before, a week or two before, because he transferred them all onto cassette tapes so they could play them in his old people's home on his cassette
Oh,
player
right.
because
Okay.
he couldn't take his record collection in with him. That old man's collection found its way into my collection because I bought loads of them.
Mm.
And Billie Holiday was one of them. Ben Webster. I was a big fan of Ben Webster's tenor saxophone, and I bought a load of them. But I bought Billie Holiday's, and then I fell in love with Billie Holiday, and I became an obsessive Billie Holiday fan. I've got a very fond memory of playing this song one night. I lived in a flat above a shop in Station Lane, which was the main street through Featherstone where I lived. And I'd been in the pub and I was a bit drunk, and I wasn't ready for bed. So I quietly played some records, and I looked out of my window, my front living room window faced onto the street. So I watched people weaving their way home drunk down the street. I watched people arguing. I watched the lights in the street and the odd car going past, and the night became quieter and quieter and quieter. You know how it is at that
Mm.
time of night, early hours of morning. And this record came on. And there's just some times when a record becomes a soundtrack to your view. My front room window perfectly framed a nighttime street. And this song perfectly chimed with the nighttime I saw outside.
It's 2:45. There's no one in the place. except you and me. So set 'em up, Joe. I've got a little story you all know. We're drinking, my friend, to the end of a brief episode. Make it one for my baby and one more for the road. I got the routine, so drop another nickel in the machine. I'm feeling so bad. I wish you'd make the music dreamy and sad. Could tell you a lie, but you've got to be true to your code. Make it one for my baby and one more for the road. You'd never know it, but buddy, I'm kind of a poet, and I've got a lot of things to say. And when I'm gloomy, you simply gotta listen to me until it's talked away. Well, that's how it goes. And Joe, I know you're getting anxious to close. So thanks for the cheer. I hope you didn't mind my bending your ear. This torch that I found must be drowned, or it soon might explode. Make it one for my baby and one more for the road. You never know it, but buddy, I'm kind of a poet, and I've got a lot of things to say. And when I'm gloomy, you simply gotta listen to me until it's talked away. Well, that's how it goes. And Joe, I know you're getting anxious to close. Thanks for the cheer. I hope you didn't mind my bending your ear. This torch that I found must be drowned, or it soon might explode. Make it one for my baby and one more for the road. That long
Billie Holiday with One for My Baby, the something old choice of my guest mixer this week, Ian Clayton. Now, Ian, one of your books that I've mentioned already is Bringing It All Back Home, which I think I bought the first time I went to one of Root's events with the stall, and I picked up. I thought that looks interesting. Some books are easy to describe. My book, for example, is very easy to describe. It's about the fall. It's about all the records they released in chronological order. It's very simple and straightforward. Bringing It All Back Home is a bit harder to pin down, really, isn't it? I mean, I said in the introduction, a phrase I think I took from the website, a book about searching for a soundtrack to your own life story. You could argue, reading it, that it's mainly about music, gigs, and drinking. But it's about a lot more than that, isn't it? How would you describe it as a book?
It's about what music does to us and where it takes us. I think music's often the starting point for a lot of journeys. And I've always been a traveller, as you can see from reading my book. I mean, I went to India back in the day, before rough guides and before people knew about travelling in Asia. Really, the people who've been to India before me and Heather, my partner, had been the hippies in the early 70s. So I've always been a traveller. I've always been a dreamer. I've always been a finder outer. I like to find out things. I like to pick stones up and look what's underneath them, and I like to see what's over a wall. I like to look through a window I haven't looked through before. And I think you can apply a lot of that to music. It's not wallpaper, but the music that's playing in the background of wherever I've been is what that book's about, really. And things that have happened to me in my life is what that book's about, you know.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question, and I couldn't come up with a question for this. I mean, I will put links to all the books that I mentioned on the webpage at stevemixtapes.com. And I would encourage people, if they're going to buy them, and I made this little rant when I interviewed the other Ian last week, for people to buy things direct from the publisher. Don't go to Amazon, all the rest of it. Buy direct from the publisher. It's better for little publishers and it's better for authors. And because I'm hoping that, at least a few people might click on the link and buy this book, I don't want to sort of ask anything that would give away what happens towards the end of the book. So rather than ask you a question, I'm just going to tell you, I have to say that is one of probably the most powerfully affected I've ever been by a book, because the ending of it almost comes out of nowhere. And I was quite profoundly moved by it, I have to say. I don't want to say any more than that. Not that I'm squeamish about what it's about. And what it's about, you've written another book about entirely, haven't you?
Yes.
I don't want to spoil the end of it for anybody who might link it. But I just wanted to tell you that
That's kind of you to say it. I mean, a lot of people have said that to me, Steve. I wrote it in a very raw moment of my life, and I wrote it non-stop, really. The book was finished, and then something profound happened in our lives, in our family's life, and I wanted to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And because I saw it as a lot of the book comes cascading down into that last chapter.
Yeah.
And I wanted to acknowledge that. And I wrote it by hand at my kitchen table in the middle of the night until my hand went bone white and stiff. I couldn't write anymore. And that was the end of the book then. And then that became the thing that a lot of the critics talked about. I mean, I think the book stands up as a book about music and life already.
Yeah.
But then there's that ending. But fair play to the critics. It was well received by the critics. Was this book, and a lot of people say it's their favourite music book, and I'm proud of them saying that. And you should see the letters I've had, Steve. I've had thousands of letters about it over the years. It's been a good friend to me, that book.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, Ian Daley at Root won't mind me saying this. I hope. Well, I know he won't mind me saying it, but it also set Root off on its way for writing music books, because Root now is probably the most famous publisher of quality music books that we've got in this country.
Yeah.
But all of them came not as a consequence of bringing it all back home, but because people had read Bringing It All Back Home, they wanted to be in touch with Root with their own ideas for music books as well. And they knew that he was a publisher that published decent quality music books. So a lot of the music books that have come after or in the wake of Bringing It All Back Home have been because of Bringing It All Back Home. But then I have to qualify that by saying it was Ian Daley's idea in the first place. I hadn't thought to write a music book.
Mm.
I was talking one day with Ian Daley because I know Ian well from Yorkshire Art Circus times, and we were in the Bradley Arms pub in North Featherstone, near where I live now, 20 years ago, and he said, "Why don't you write a book about music? You're always talking to people about music. You're always talking about your travels in music. Why don't you write a book about music?" And so I said, "I will." And then I wrote, and that's the book I wrote. So it was his idea. I have to thank him for that.
Yeah, and you know, I would recommend to anybody all of the books on Root. Really, they're good quality music books because Ian and Isabel are very good editors, and they understand how a book works. But they're also both music obsessives. And you know, there are a lot of trashy music books out there that are published by people who know or care little about music, and that's not the case with any single book on Root. So plenty of links. So go to them, buy some books, and particularly if you haven't read Bringing It All Back Home, then I would highly recommend you do so. Shall we move on, Ian, to your Something Blue choice? We've been talking about quite sad topics in a way, but you haven't taken that angle in a way. Some people for this choice choose something sad or melancholy for the Something Blue, but you've gone for some proper blues music.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a blues music obsessive again. I'm saying this word obsessive too much. I'm not really obsessed by anything really, but I'm an aficionado then, if you like. But I was in Cornwall in the late 70s, doing what young people do in Cornwall, going up beach and drinking beer and smoking too much weed and just having a nice time. And the one morning I was in a market. I think they call it the Pannier Market in Wadebridge in Cornwall. And I'm fingering my way through a cardboard box full of old battered LPs. And one of them was Elmore James. It was an album called Who's Muddy Shoes by Elmore James and John Brim. I've still got it. It's on Chess label. And it had a fantastic cover of Elmore James holding up his guitar with his long fingers on the guitar neck. And that's what set me off being interested in blues music. And then in them days, you had to, if you wanted rare blues records, you had to get them mail order. You couldn't buy them from normal record shops. But there was a bloke called Sailor Vernon who published a catalogue, and you used to write to him with a self-addressed stamped envelope for him to write back to you. And he published this catalogue that had an auction in it, and I started collecting blues records that way. And the one who stood out above everybody was T-Bone Walker, who I think is just magic.
Cause when you're not happy, it ain't no fun at all. You can't take it with you, that's one thing for sure. You can't take it with you, baby, that's one thing for sure. There's nothing wrong with you, baby, that a good T-bone shuffle can't cure. You can face an awful thing. Have fun where you can face an awful thing. You can't tell what might happen. That's why I love to sing.
T-Bone Walker from 1959 with T-Bone Shuffle from an album called T-Bone Blues. I think that's the right album.
It's on the Atlantic label. It's the only album he made for Atlantic.
Now, for your Take It Down choice, we're back to your friend Volker, and we're back to John Martin as well. I have to say, Ian, I look, as I always do, as soon as I get the list from a guest mixer, I stick it on a playlist and I have it on in the car or when I'm doing a bit of cooking or something like that. And this one blew me away. And I can honestly say, I think this is one of the best cover versions I've ever heard. I think this is absolutely marvellous.
I'm glad you think it. I tried to make a few links within the playlist about people who I know and song music that I like. Volker was a dear friend of mine. We travelled well together. We drank a lot of beer. We've drank far more beer, much more beer than we needed to together. And we shared a lot of good friendship, really good friendship. And we had each other's back, if you like, and we did a lot of good things. Yeah, Volker introduced me to John Martin. One day Volker had a Dodge Ram van, and we're driving in this Dodge Ram, and he had a cassette of Portishead's new first album, the one with Glory Box on it, and we got to John Martin's, and John Martin says, "What's this you're listening?" We were driving with John Martin in the van, then down to a pub, and "What's this?" And it's ironic, really, that there's John, the kind of godfather of kind of trance music in a way, listening to a German man playing him Bristol trip hop music. But that's where John first heard it. I can remember the moment John first heard it, and then sometime later John does his own cover version of the Portishead song. But I mean, it's a cover version of a cover version actually, because Portishead got it from Isaac Hayes' Black Moses album.
A lot of that whole album is sort of a reconstruction of old songs, isn't it? The Portishead one.
Is it called Trip Hop Reconstruction? Oh no, that's another album.
No, the
it's
first
called
one was
Dummy, isn't it?
It was Dummy, yeah.
But well, Portishead were famously reconstructors of old soul songs and sampled some old soul songs. I think it's called Ike's Rap or Ike's Rap number 3 or something like that, the original. And it's that beautiful, haunting sound.
Well, the original, I mean, when you were talking about your Billie Holiday choice before, that's one of the glories of music, isn't it? A particular song can lock you into a time and a place, can't it? So you're evening looking out your window. This whole Portishead album for me is very evocative because it was the sound. It was the dinner party album, wasn't it? The late 90s. And it was. I remember living in Hunmanby with a young family. I think probably my 2 eldest were little then. and watching that program about the young lawyers. Was it called This Life or something like that?
Yes.
And whenever they sat together having dinner, a Portishead album was always on in the background, sort of.
Yes.
In a way. And it just, I don't know, it just reminds me of that period of my life. You know, I just taken on my
Yeah.
first head of department job as a teacher. I had a young family, and you know, when a song or an album is just completely ties you to one place, and that was it. So I've always had a great
Yeah.
affection for that album. And when I saw it was John Martin, who I like John Martin. I don't know his stuff well, and he's on my long list of artists I must listen to more of at some point. Doing this, I thought, ooh, I wonder what that's going to sound. But I have to say, I was blown away by this. I hope you are too. This is John Martin with Glory Box.
I'm so tired of playing with this bow and this arrow. Yeah, I'm gonna give my heart away and leave it to the other boys out there to play. Been tempted too long. Come on, give me a reason to love you. Give me a reason to wanna be your man. Give me a reason to love you. Give me a reason if you can. From this time unchanged, we were all looking at a different picture to a different frame of mind. 1,000 flowers may bloom. Could it be time to move over? Move over, give me some room. Give me a reason to love you. Give me a reason to wanna be your man. Give me a reason to love you. Please, one reason, if you can. Don't you start looking like some woman. Take a little look from the outside if you can. Do it for me now. Try a little tenderness, little shabby dress. I wouldn't care.
From the 1998 album The Church with One Bell, which Ian referenced early on, that was John Martin with Glory Box. Now, Ian, I normally ask at this point, before the Around the World choice, I ask people if they listen to a lot of music that isn't from North America or the UK. I don't really feel I need to ask you that.
No, I am a massive fan of what became known as world music. I don't think world music's the best name we could give it, really. Every music's world music. It's like there was a Louis Armstrong quote, wasn't there? All folk music, all music is folk music. You never heard a horse singing, did you? And that's that's a attributed to Louis Armstrong. Um, no, global music, if you like, I suppose, or just music from all around. There was a shop in Whitfield Street in London.
Okay.
I was every time I worked in London, I used to visit various shops. I used to go to the bookshops on St Giles, not St Giles Court, St Giles Court. But I also used to go to a lot of record shops. I used to go to Mole Jazz in King's Cross. I used to go to Ray's Jazz Shop, which was a fabulous jazz shop in near Shaftesbury Avenue. He had a cardboard box, and he had a sign, a felt tipped sign saying "rare as hen's teeth," and the prices were ridiculously high. And when he closed, just before he closed, and I went in for one last time, I thought I need to buy something out of that rare as hen's teeth box, just for old time's sake, and I did. It wasn't too expensive. But the other shop I used to go to a lot was called Stearns, and it was in Whitfield Street, but somewhere near the back of Post Office Tower, that area of London. I think they had a box of Ghanaian high life records and Nigerian records for local African people who used to buy their hairdryers and irons there. And so they could have a flick through these African imports. And that part of it developed over years until it became a fully fledged African record shop. And I started going in there and just buying whatever were playing on record player if I liked it. I'd stay in there for an hour or more, and whatever they were playing, I'd ask about it, and then I bought it. It eventually became a record label in its own right. Did Stearns Record Shop turned into a record label called Stearns, and they put out some wonderful African compilations in 80s and 90s. So that's how I found my way into listening to the other, if you like. One Saturday morning, I was taking my son to his piano lesson, and on the first floor of the shop was a shop. They sold sheet music and strings for guitars and small musical instruments. And on the next floor, they had an academy where they taught children to play various instruments. So I'm waiting downstairs in shop, waiting for my son to finish his piano lesson, and there were a man sitting on a stool stringing a guitar. But when he'd strung it, he started playing very gently and softly and singing this very mournful song in a language, in an Eastern European language. And when he'd finished, I said to him, "That's a Sevdalinka song." And he looked at me and he said, "You know Sevdalinka?" I said, "Well, I've heard some, yeah. I've heard a band called the Mostar Reunion Band doing Sevdalinka." It turned out he was a Bosnian. They call him Mohammed Salkic. He'd escaped the war in Bosnia and Serbia. They were trying to seek refuge in this country, and he became a right good friend of mine. I loved him. He didn't. His asylum application wasn't successful, and he got sent back to Bosnia. And I've been to see him. I've been to Bosnia to see him. He lives up over at top at Balkan Mountains in a place called Tuzla. Once when I went to see him, he took me to Sarajevo, and I couldn't go to Sarajevo without finding a record shop. So I found a record shop. All they sold were pirate copies of Western music, but they had pirate copies of their own music as well. And in the shop was playing this song, Jako Ostala Deca, and it's about a young gypsy boy lost in the world, and it's beautiful.
Ljudi me poznaju svi, svako mi pesmu voli, niko mi sudbinu ne zna, ne znaju moje boli. Ja ko ostala deca želim da imam majku i oca svog. Ja ko ostala deca želim topli dom. Krčma se zatvara sada, ulicom tama vlada. Ljudi su kućama svojim, kome da pevam sada. Ja ko ostala deca želim da imam majku i oca svog. Ja ko ostala deca želim topli dom. Zvezdice, molim te, čuj, potraži majku moju.
And it's by a famous gypsy singer called Liliana Butler. Strange name, Liliana Butler. It's a common name in Bosnia, Liliana, but Butler, I don't know where Butler comes
Yeah,
from.
Butler with 2 T's as well.
2 T's, yeah. She is the mother of. She was always on Yugoslavian when it was Yugoslavia. She was always on Yugoslavian television music programs singing, because she was like a goddess over there as a singer.
Now, before we get to your left of centre choice, Ian, I just wanted to ask you another one of your books. You've written a book, and I must confess, I haven't got this one yet, although I do intend to. It's The Beer Talking. So you, as well as a lifelong passion for music, you have a lifelong passion for pubs. I have 3 red flags for a pub. That means I won't go into it. Okay, so one is if there is a bouncer on the door. The second is if people are queuing to get into it. And the third one is if it's prime advertising on the front of it is to do with what live sport it's showing. But taking a more positive tack, what do you think makes a great pub?
Well, first of all, I'd agree with your 3 reasons for not going in. I only go in local pubs. Here's Ian Clayton and his philosophical bit. I'm a believer in localness, wherever local is. So when I'm in Wuppertal, as I am quite often in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, I've got a local pub there called the Katzengold that I know just as well as the Bradley Arms, which is a few hundred yards from where I live. And I like them for the same reasons, because they're local. I like local. I adore localness. I adore what any local place has got to offer and what I have in common with that place. It all came to me a good few years ago, you know. I was in Poland and I was in a city called Zabrze, which is a coal mining city in south of Poland, near the Ukrainian border. And it smelt like my childhood, this town. We went to visit this bloke's mother, and she had rabbit pens in backyard, which I'd had rabbit pens in my backyard when I was a young un. And the more unfolded and I found out about in that town, the more I realised I had more in common with that town in southeast Poland than I've got with some towns in Yorkshire where I live. I can go to towns in Yorkshire and I've got nothing in common with them. I'm not going to name them, but you might guess.
Well, I can give a personal example, and I think you will understand what I mean. So when my first wife and I separated, I ended up living in Welshpool on Welshpool High Street, and there was a pub next to me called the Talbot, and it was literally next door to me. I measured it once; it was 13 steps from my front door to the door of the pub. And to be honest, Ian, if I'd ever gone to the Talbot, not living close to it, or if I just, had a passing drink at a visiting place, I wouldn't have thought much of it. The beer wasn't, the beer was average. It wasn't particularly nice decor or anything like that. But I came to love that pub because it was a pub where I'd pop in just for one on my way back from work. And it was the same 9 people sat in the front bar every day. And they were completely disparate, odd bunch of people, but I got to know them well. They were lovely. And also, when my wife and I, Kirsty, got together, I lived in that house, and we used to go there and we used to have a drink. We used to have a glass of white wine and a pint of whatever bitter they had, and we used to sit in the back of the beer garden and do the Shropshire Star cryptic crossword. And we did that every day, and that was part of our getting to know each other. Those days, sat just having a quick drink, doing the crossword. And I love that pub. And it was closed for ages. And it's only recently reopened. I've not been back in. The pub itself, objectively, wasn't the greatest pub. But it means a lot to me. It was there, an important part of my life. And it was an interesting bunch of people. And do you know the sort of thing I mean?
Absolutely, I know the sort of thing you mean. And you can't always put your finger on it. We try to quantify and qualify a lot of things in these modern times. And you can't always do that. There's something that appeals to you. People talk about community. That's a much abused word, I think. People talk about the community in pubs. That's abused. There's people I can't stand at the other side of the bloody bar in some pubs I go in. So, so they talk about community. I love pubs. I love the stories I bump into on the way back from bars. I like bumping into stories. And you bump into a lot of stories in pubs. And then new stories start because of it. You can tell I'm powered by stories or the notion of the story. I tell stories. About every question you ask me, I tell a story.
Well, your notes, every set of notes for all 10 songs was a story, wasn't it?
Yeah. Everything about me is a story. I live my life to tell stories. My life's a story. I worry about it sometimes because I wonder how well rehearsed that story has become. I try my best not to repeat myself if I can, but I know I do. And I try my best not to rehearse stories that I know I'm going to tell too much because then it takes away the spontaneity of it. You've been good. You've asked me the right kind of questions that makes me more spontaneous. It's the Beer Talking is a book full of stories about pubs. That's another Ian Daley idea. I hadn't thought to write a book about beer. And then Ian Daley said, why don't you write a book about beer?
He's full of bright ideas, isn't he? Now, moving on, your left of centre choice. Now, you could have had this, of course, for your around the world choice. Because the around the world choice has taken this show to many places. We've been to Japan, to Cambodia, to Brazil, but we've never been to Outer Mongolia.
I adore this woman. She's called Sainko Namtchilak. She's from Tuva, which is an autonomous republic in Outer Mongolia. It was where, the famous American philosopher and scientist Richard Feynman always wanted to get to Tuva. He wrote a book called Tuva or Bust. I discovered that there was an album called Letters, and the theme of the album was all the letters that Sanko had written home to her father while she was studying in Moscow. And it's very, very experimental music. Senko is one of the few women who can do overtone singing. It's a shamanistic type of singing that only men do in Outer Mongolia normally. And it's overtone, and sometimes they can make two or even triple sounds at once. Some of the sounds are guttural from the throat and gut, and some through the nose. And they can sing 2 or 3 tones simultaneously. It's incredible to hear it. This track I've chosen is more of is Senko's attempt to be a pop music singer.
Yeah, well, because what I was going to say is that I wasn't aware of her, so I had a quick skim around, things that are available online just to get a sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is a lot more challenging and left of centre than this. This, as you say, it's an attempt at a pop song. It actually reminded me a little bit of All That She Wants by Ace of Base at the beginning. Do you remember that?
It might have been out round about the same time. It's got that beat, aye. I first saw her do it at York University. She was on with a Tuvan rock band called Yak Ka. But I first heard this tune then, and I thought, my word, what's she doing now? She's trying to be Bjork or something. So it's a happy song about letting the sun shine in, but it's also got elements of the overtone singing in it as well.
Thinking easy, talking friendly to your spirits. Getting better, getting warmer, let the sun shine. Over troubles, over darkness, learning yourself. Getting better, getting easy, let the sun shine.
From the 2000 album Stepmother City, that was Sainko Namchalak, have I said that right? And Let the Sun Shine. Right, now, for your wildcard choice, you've gone for Roy Orbison. And it made me think, I don't know why, but do you know the little story that Simon Wollstonecraft, ex of The Fall, tells about him going to see Roy Orbison with Mark E. Smith and his mum?
I don't know that story.
I'll put a link to it telling the story, but basically, they all trekked off to Stockport to see Roy Orbison. Thought he was marvelous, and only realised 2 days later that it was a tribute act that they'd said.
Well,
there's a link to Simon telling that story on Twitter, and he tells a nice anecdote to Si. So put it on there. Now, I didn't know this song. And I didn't know the album it's from, and I've been on Wikipedia. Obviously, it's Roy Orbison's 24th and final solo album, recorded in 1969. The album he recorded it. It says surreptitiously in the aftermath of his wife Claudette's death in a motorcycle accident and the death of his two sons in a house fire 2 years later. And the album was long believed lost. So I didn't know about this album. It's quite the story behind this one.
When I was a boy, on a Saturday night, my granddad used to go to Gurney Lane Working Men's Club, and I used to sit on a wall outside at club, and he'd bring me a bottle of pop out. And I liked it because I was close to my granddad and his drinking mates, but I liked it because I used to hear the sound of music coming through the doors every time somebody opened a door. I'd hear local working men's club bands doing very passable cover versions of whatever were in the charts at the time. This song, Say No More, it's a rare Roy Orbison song, actually, because, as you said, that album was never released at the time. It came out as an afterthought many years later.
2015, I think, was as late as it came.
2015, there you are. So it's been recorded 40 years before or something. It's a song by Sammy King. Now, Sammy King came from Batley Way On, and he was a working men's club turn. And the story goes that Sammy went to see Roy Orbison play at Batley and took 3 songs on a cassette and said, "Would you care to listen to these songs I've written, Mr. Orbison, with a view to recording them?" And Roy liked his cheek and said, "Well, look, we're going for a meal in the Beef Eater." And when we finished, can you imagine that? They play at Batley Variety Club to Chicken in a Basket people, and they go to Beef Eater for their own dinner. So they go to Beef Eater. And Sammy comes along with his, and they listened to a portable cassette tape of these songs. And Roy said, "I like them," and recorded them. And one of them was this song, Say No More.
Say no more. I understand. Our love affair didn't go as I planned. Say no more. Just walk away. Have no regret. I'll forget you someday. Now we go our different ways. The lonely nights and endless days begin. For me, true our loves come to an end, but still you want me as a friend, and so, friend, I will be. Say no more. I understand. If you're so sure, say no more. Say no more. Just walk away. Have no regret. I'll forget you someday. Now we go our different ways. The lonely nights and endless days begin. For me, true our loves come to an end, but still you want me as a friend, and so, friend, I must be. Say no more. I understand. If you're so sure, say no more. Say no more.
Roy Orbison with Say No More from the recorded in 1969 album One of the Lonely Ones that wasn't released until 2015. Now, before we get to your finale choice, Ian, what have you got in the pipeline? Any books or anything exciting coming up for you?
I've been preparing for my retirement.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I've wound down a bit over the last year or so. I will write something else because there's always going to be something that I can write. I've never lost my interest in writing and playing with words and telling stories. So yeah, something will come. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is yet.
Right, your finale choice. Now, I've been quite surprised by the artists since I've been doing this that have cropped up more than once. Now, there've been a few people choose The Fall, which is not surprising. A few people have chosen Sparks, which again, possibly not surprising. I was a bit more perturbed, not perturbed is not the right word, but a bit taken aback that Blue Oyster Cult have made 3 appearances on this show this year, which I was quite
Wow.
surprised by. And I'm also quite surprised to see that you are the second person to choose a song by Odyssey. Because
Yeah.
back in show 27, Billy Reeves, he of the audience and a pessimist is never disappointed, he chose Native New Yorker. You've gone for possibly the other most famous single, Back to My Roots. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier about your work on a building site, and there's a story attached to this that goes back to your building site days.
Yeah, I worked. One of my mates on building sites, Bert. He had a Triumph Tiger. We used to knock about on. I was his pillion passenger, and we went from building site to building site on his motorbike. Bert had a very quirky sense of humour, very ironic lad. He was a very well-educated man. He'd had private school education because his family were wealthy, and he'd ended up studying biochemistry at Manchester back in the 70s, but I think he got slung out for drunkenness and not turning up to any lectures or anything. And he ended up working up building sites, and he was happy working up building sites. Although he was a real polymath, he was a shortwave radio enthusiast, and he knew a lot about the life and works of Maria Callas, and the ins and outs of motorbike engines like nobody I ever met. But he was happy working on building sites, digging holes, and he had this ironic sense of humour, which said that in the late 70s, me and him should get into disco music. And it was the most ridiculous notion ever, really. But he became quite a fan of Kool and the Gang. So I decided that I'd become a fan of Odyssey.
Picking up my boots, going back to my roots, yeah, to the place of my birth, back down to earth.
A single from 1981, that was Odyssey with Back to My Roots, the finale of the mix by my guest mixer this week, Ian Clayton. Well, Ian, it only remains for me to say thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed doing the show.
I have. It's been nice. I like doing things like this. I like telling tale and meeting people of a fellow traveller, shall we say.